Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to show you how I do a lace closure install from start to finish. Now, I started a little bit before I started recording this video, but what I did was I made a part where I wanted the closure to lay, and then I began to braid away from the closure. I do about, depending on how much space the client has, from their hairline to their ear, I'll do as many braids as I can before I'll take the braid down, as you can see me doing now. And I connect the braids at the bottom for the first couple of braids so that there isn't any bulkiness in the front of the sew-in. And the last braid that I do, I'll take it under the first braid that I take around the perimeter of their head. After you finish that braid, I take the braids that are going down to the side as far back as the closure is going to be. So if you think about how long a closure is, which is 4 inches, I'll do about 4 inches of braids going down to the side, and I'll take the rest of the braids in the back going straight back and connecting them halfway throughout the braid. Nine times out of 10, when I make that last braid that's going down the side, I'll jump over to the other side to start the braids, to make them, the same amount of braids on each side. And then once I finish both sides, I'll start doing the up and down braids in the back. As you can see, I skipped the side braids because I didn't have a good angle of it, just like I don't have a good angle of this right now. It's kind of hard for me to film this part of the braiding portion, but this is the first braid that is gonna go up and down into the rest of the braids. So sometimes if you can't keep track of how many braids you need to braid up and down, I would just part it straight down the middle, but not directly in the middle, because you don't want your part to go straight down to the back of their head. I kind of know these days when I'm at the halfway mark and when I need to hop to the other side. So I just can eyeball it. Now, a lot of people have trouble with the up and down braids, but all it is you doing the first braid completely, braiding it down to the end, going to do a next braid. As you can see, I'm parting the next braid, and I'm going to start to braid. And when I get halfway down the braid that I'm doing, I'm going to pull the end of the first braid into the second braid. Now, I'm not sure if this is going to be a great angle so you can see that I'm braiding down, and I'm going to get to the halfway mark and pull it up as if it was a piece of hair that I was adding into the braid. Now, some people's hair is longer than others, so depending on how long their hair is will determine how far up you need to bring the braid into the braid that you're doing. It just depends on how thick the person's hair is, because you don't want it to be bulky. So now that you're finished braiding, you're going to take two rubber bands to secure the ends of each braid and tuck them into the other braids. I like to do this because I don't want my clients' braids unraveling under their sew-ins, even though I do braid very neatly. I'm then gonna go in and oil my client's scalp. I normally use a Jamaican lock oil that comes in a bottle with a nozzle on it, but I did not have that. I ran out of it, so I'm going in with my coconut oil Blue Magic grease, the good old reliable. And I use nets for my sew-ins because I just want my clients to have that extra security and to also have that protection over their hair. A lot of people don't like nets because they say they can't scratch their scalp, which they really can't. But I would rather not be able to scratch my scalp or have to take a comb and put a comb in my hair rather than to be cutting my hair out or to be not being able to keep my sewing in for as long as I want to. And when I sew my nets on, I start in the back and I have my client hold it while I'm cutting it to form their head. And I also have them hold it while I'm sewing it down. I would say typically throughout each sew in, I use between 5 to 7 needles. Now, that depends on how big the client's head is. Now, sometimes I'll leave like old needles from with a little bit of thread left on it. I'll just save them for when it's time for me to sew my closure down, because it's really hard to sew a closure down with a very, very long thread, because you have to keep keeping up with the thread as you're sewing down the closure. Now, be careful when you are cutting off the excess net, because there has been a time where I've snipped somebody's ear a little bit, not a lot, but a little bit. It happens when you do hair, from cutting the net off. So my client will be using 2 bundles of my 14-inch body wave hair today. Her head is a little smaller, so she's able to use 2 bundles because they're shorter. Now, I sometimes have to go in and flat iron the wefts of my client's bundles, whether it be my hair or whether it be from somewhere else, to get all of the harsh, like not bumps, but like the crinkly parts of the weft out, so that I can sew it in on a straight track with no lumps, no problems, and for it to be super flat. So when you sew the back of the hair in, you need to make sure it's symmetrical. Even when you're at the top, you need to make sure it's symmetrical. But when it comes to folding the track over, you need to, I double weft. If you single weft, you're not gonna have this problem. But I double weft. So when you're double wefting and you're folding tracks, you need to release one of the tracks, which is the one on the top, and stitch the bottom track only. Fold it, stitch it again, double knot it, and then continue to stitch. And when you're going down the side, you need to pick up that track that you did not stitch down. If you get what I'm saying. I don't know if you guys are paying attention, but I have not cut one track yet. And I don't cut tracks until I get to the top. Now, I know a lot of people probably wondering, like, why haven't you sewed the closure on yet? I sew the closure on last. I do not sew the closure on first anymore, just because when you sew the closure on first, depending on how you sew, I sew like underhanded, I guess you would say. I don't sew over top of the track, I sew under it. The motion of you stitching will pull the closure back. So it'll start to slide back, not slide back, but it'll start to the the tension from you sewing in the tracks will move the closure. So I'd rather just eyeball when I'm sewing sewing the tracks on, to know how much space I need for the closure. So when I get around to this mark, I typically stop sewing in when it's like a little over 6 inches left at the top of their head. I'll stop sewing in and get the closure. Now, I did bleach the closure off camera, but if you want a video on how to do that, just comment below and I'll make a video. Now, when you're stitching the closure down, you have to have your client hold the closure in place while you're stitching it down, because if not, that thing will be jacked up and you'll be sewing that closure on all day. I sew the front of the closure down before I sew the back, because I would rather know that it's correctly in place before I sew the back in. Because sometimes you can tell your client to hold the closure and they'll hold it, but they'll let it slide back as soon as you pull on it. Child, this closure is scalping. All I did was bleach it. I haven't even plucked it yet and it still look good. So I like to use the angle tweezers that are sharp. I can't use no dull tweezers to pluck no closure. It'll look a mess. I first begin plucking one side, and then I'll do the other side, and then I'll go in and do back and forth motions between both sides to give it that realistic look. Do y'all see that scalp, honey? Now, her closure was still wet. If it's not, I typically spray a little water on it, spray a little oil on it to like kind of make the flyaways stay in place, clip it up, and I'll finish sewing in the tracks. I always go back and forth with my stitches at the top. I would just make sure that that last knot is like 3 knots so that it doesn't come loose. I feel like this video was already long enough, so if you want to see how I styled her install, check out my next video. Thanks.